Heaven has scheduled this very night for your awakening, not tomorrow, not next week, but this precise hour. Something sacred is unfolding, an interruption orchestrated by God Himself. The line between who you were and who you are becoming has been drawn. For years it felt like nothing was moving, like your prayers hung in the air unanswered. But tonight carries a different sound, the sound of acceleration. What took a decade to build in secret is about to emerge in power. This is not an ordinary hour, it's prophetic. You didn't just arrive here by chance, you were led here by destiny's hand. Every tear, every battle, every season of silence has been building to this moment. God has been clearing paths you couldn't see and opening doors no one else could shut. As He declared in Isaiah 45 verse 2, He goes before you to make the crooked places straight. That means every confusing detour was never wasted. It was divine design. The pain of the past 10 years wasn't punishment, it was preparation. What you thought was delay was actually construction behind closed doors. God was strengthening the foundation before He revealed the structure. When you couldn't trace His hand, He was still holding your heart. Even in your lowest hours, His plan never faltered. Psalm 102 verse 13 declares that there is a set time to favor Zion. That time isn't in the distant future, it's now. Heaven's schedule has reached your name. This is not about another cycle of waiting. This is about fulfillment, meeting perfect timing. The silence that once felt like abandonment was actually incubation. Hidden dreams have been maturing in the soil of surrender. You've been in God's greenhouse unseen but never forgotten. Let this truth ignite your spirit. Every seed planted in faith will soon break through the ground. You are stepping into an era of visible fruit. The prayers that felt buried under disappointment are about to rise as evidence. What once whispered impossible will soon proclaim fulfilled. God has not overlooked your obedience. He has been storing it as oil for this hour. The waiting wasn't wasted time, it was oil gathering time. When the pressure increased, He wasn't punishing you, He was pressing you for purity. Romans 13 verse 11 reminds us that it's time to awaken from sleep, for salvation is nearer than we first believed. This moment carries more purpose than the years behind you combined, because it holds the manifestation of everything you've endured. Heaven's clock has struck your appointed hour. What's been locked in delay is unlocking by divine decree. God's favor doesn't move by the calendar, it moves by alignment. This is the hour of alignment. You're not stepping into recovery, you're stepping into revelation. Every hidden battle will finally make sense under the light of this appointed time. The same hand that allowed the stretching is now releasing the breakthrough. Don't blink, don't hesitate. God is turning your private endurance into public elevation. Everything you lost track of in the past will find its purpose here. This moment is not another page in your story. It's the chapter where everything begins to make sense. The heavens are open, the timing is perfect, and your name is echoing through eternity's corridors. What God begins in this hour will not unfold slowly. It will burst forth suddenly like light breaking through a long darkness. Every hidden season you thought was wasted was actually a forge. God was designing the blueprint for this very moment. The silence you mistook for absence was sacred strategy. What seemed like stillness was divine activity, a holy construction happening beneath the surface of your waiting. You didn't lose time, you were being aligned. The hidden years weren't punishment, they were preparation. God was teaching you how to hear Him in whispers, how to trust Him when the evidence vanished, and how to keep walking when nothing around you moved. What you called delay, heaven called development. Sometimes silence is the language God uses when words would only distract. Psalm 37 verse 7 reminds you to rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Rest doesn't mean inactivity. It means trust in motion. While you were questioning if anything was changing, roots were deepening. Hiddenness is not the absence of destiny. It's where destiny takes shape. You were not buried, you were planted. Every unseen moment in prayer, every night spent wrestling with unseen battles, became the soil for a strength you could not have learned in the spotlight. God was shaping your faith in the shadows so it could withstand the weight of visibility. You see, God never hides what he doesn't intend to reveal. The concealment was intentional, not accidental. Isaiah 49 verse 2 declares that God hides his chosen ones in the shadow of his hand and makes them polished arrows. The waiting room became your weapon room. You thought you were forgotten, but you were being refined for revelation. Hiddenness is heaven's form of protection. It shelters you from premature exposure that could destroy what has not yet matured. God hid you to heal you, and healed you to reveal you. Like Joseph, your isolation was not rejection, it was prophetic training ground. The pit, the prison, and the years of misunderstanding were not wasted chapters, they were divine classrooms. God used those seasons to train your discernment and strengthen your humility. Deuteronomy 8 verse 2 reminds you that the wilderness is designed to humble and test, to reveal what's in your heart before promotion comes. The tears you shed there became oil that will fuel your future. Every disappointment was secretly teaching endurance, every betrayal was birthing wisdom, and every delay was forming discipline. What broke you was actually building you. God was dismantling false identities and removing the scaffolding of pride, fear, and control. The breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of becoming. You were being stripped of dependence on outcomes so you could lean fully on his voice. The silence forced you to listen differently, not with your ears, but with your spirit. Faith learned to breathe in the dark. When you felt nothing and heard nothing, you were still surrounded by everything you needed. His purpose, his plan, his unseen hand. The hidden years weren't wasted, they were divine investment. Heaven was fortifying your faith for public favor. Before God ever displays his promise, he develops his person. He was securing your identity so your future success wouldn't redefine you. You were learning how to stand on truth when applause faded, and how to remain humble when recognition arrives. The years that seemed silent were strengthening your spiritual spine. You learned to bow in prayer before standing in power. Divine setup often feels like delay before it manifests as acceleration. The stillness of your past season is about to give way to sudden movement. Everything God has been preparing is converging in this moment. You are stepping into the visible result of invisible obedience. What looked like years of nothing are about to reveal themselves as the architecture of everything. The same God who concealed your purpose is about to announce it. Heaven was never silent. It was strategizing. You are about to see that every unanswered question was actually being written into your breakthrough. What once seemed like divine distance was sacred direction. The hidden years were set up, not setback, and the silence that once felt suffocating is transforming into sound. Every moment you endured in faith has become the melody of manifestation. The night that once felt quiet is roaring with fulfillment, and what was hidden in you is being revealed for his glory. You see, heaven doesn't always shout change. Sometimes it whispers it in your spirit before the world ever notices. Transformation often begins quietly, like a breeze stirring before a storm. What feels like unease within you is not confusion. It's confirmation that the season has shifted. You've felt it in the tension, in the restlessness, in the places that used to fit, but no longer feel right. The Spirit has been announcing movement long before your circumstances caught up. Isaiah 43 verse 18 to 19 declares, "Forget the former things. I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" The word isn't asking if change is coming, it's asking if you can sense it. This stirring is spiritual before it ever becomes visible. Shifts begin in the unseen long before they manifest in the natural. Just as roots break open the soil before a sprout reaches daylight, the unseen work of God always precedes visible breakthrough. The shaking you've felt isn't chaos, it's construction. Heaven is rearranging foundations so the structure of your future can stand firm. When everything around you feels unstable, it's because something stronger is being built beneath you. God often hides his acceleration in disruption. When the divine current begins to move, it rarely announces itself with comfort. The unease you felt is your spirit aligning with God's timing. You were never meant to stay in the same rhythm forever. The Spirit will often disturb your peace to position your purpose. What used to satisfy no longer does, because your appetite has matured. The grace that covered the last season is lifting to make room for greater responsibility. You've outgrown places that once defined you, and heaven is signaling that it's time to move forward. Every divine shift requires surrender before manifestation. You cannot carry yesterday's logic into tomorrow's miracle. God doesn't just call you to move, he calls you to trust. Before Amos 9 verse 13 promises that the plowman will overtake the reaper, there must first be a surrender to the process. You must release the timeline, the method, and the need to understand every step. The shift you're sensing is an invitation, not an interruption. It's God saying, what I'm about to do will require you to let go of control. Surrender isn't loss, it's alignment. When heaven moves, the atmosphere around you changes first. Conversations start to feel different. Opportunities that once seemed impossible start resurfacing. People who no longer align with your assignment begin to fade quietly. The environment is responding to what your spirit already knows. Transition has begun. It's like John 3 verse 8 where Jesus said, "The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going." The Spirit moves the same way, invisible yet undeniable. You can feel it before you can explain it. Old cycles begin to crumble as new purpose rises. Everything built on routine rather than revelation is being dismantled. The season that once drained you is losing its grip because your spirit is craving expansion. What you used to chase will start chasing you, not because you're striving, but because you've stepped into the right alignment. The doors that were locked in the last season are opening not by effort but by timing. God is not just changing your path, he's changing your pace. Sensitivity to the Spirit reveals what others overlook. The world sees shaking, you see shaping. Others hear noise, you hear newness. Discernment becomes your advantage when others are distracted by what seems uncertain. You've learned to recognize the pulse of God in stillness, the rhythm of destiny in disruption. When he whispers, your spirit catches what your eyes have not yet seen. That's why peace accompanies you in places that should make you panic, because your soul recognizes the sound of God's movement. The moment you move in faith, you step into what patience has been building. The blessing that once seemed delayed was never denied. It was developing you in silence. Every season that felt forgotten was actually sacred preparation. You were being trained to handle what your spirit prayed for, long before your hands could hold it. What felt like a pause was divine precision. God was shaping your character to match your calling, because premature promotion can crush what patience would strengthen. Psalm 31 verse 15 reminds you that your times are in his hands. Every delay, every door, every detail has been orchestrated with purpose. Every moment of waiting was divine protection in disguise. If the door had opened too soon, you might have entered unguarded, unaware of what was meant to harm you. Delay protected what haste would have destroyed. You were not being overlooked. You were being overshadowed by mercy. God was teaching you that what's worth having must be built on trust, not timing. The detours you resented were actually directions toward destiny. Heaven was never late. It was waiting until you were strong enough to receive what was always meant for you. Transitioning from frustration to faith requires vision. It means recognizing that God doesn't move by emotion, He moves by order. His ways don't bend to human impatience. His plans operate on a rhythm only heaven can conduct. Lamentations 3 verse 25 to 26 reminds you that the Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul that seeks Him. Every divine delay carries wisdom beyond understanding. While you were asking for an answer, God was arranging alignment. The waiting wasn't punishment, it was preservation. There's a difference between stillness and stagnation. Stillness refines, stagnation resists. When God kept you in that hidden season, He was separating pressure from purpose. Every time you felt stuck, He was rooting out the fear that would have sabotaged your faith later. What you thought was silence was strategy. God's not yet was never no. It was a whisper saying, "Hold on, I'm building something you won't have to rebuild." His timing doesn't require your panic, it requires your peace. The waiting room of faith is not wasted space, it's where spiritual maturity is born. You were never forgotten. Heaven never overlooks a faithful heart. Even when it felt like everyone else was being chosen, promoted, celebrated, or seen, God was writing your chapter in invisible ink. The quiet places of surrender were where His favor grew roots. Your tears watered the ground where His promises are about to bloom. When others moved ahead, you learned endurance. When doors closed, you learned discernment. When nothing made sense, you learned trust. The foundation of your faith was never built in moments of ease, but in seasons of endurance. Sometimes patience feels like divine distance, but it's actually divine precision. God knows that what arrives too early can't carry eternal weight. The longer the wait, the greater the weight of glory attached to it. Every second of silence carried significance. Heaven's stillness was not abandonment, it was construction. The same God who spoke light into darkness has been speaking purpose into your process. You were being strengthened, stretched, and sanctified, not sidelined. When timing matures, manifestation happens suddenly. What took years to understand can shift in a moment when God says it's time. You've been positioned for a release that doesn't follow earthly logic. The same way a seed breaks through the soil after a long hidden season, your promise is emerging from the ground it's been buried in. 2 Peter 3 verse 9 declares that God isn't slow in keeping His promise, as some understand slowness. He is patient, preparing every detail for perfect revelation. The waiting you once resented will become the testimony you'll celebrate. Every unanswered prayer was an unseen investment. Every delay was storing glory. You were not waiting in vain, you were waiting for fullness. God's calendar doesn't follow human deadlines. When He moves, it won't be gradual, it will be glorious. This is the hour when what was pending becomes present, when what was held back by time is released by grace. Heaven's calendar has turned to your name. Every someday has become today. Friend, the warfare you faced wasn't meant to destroy you. It was heaven's way of testing if you could carry the crown. Every struggle that came against you was secretly preparing you for greater weight. The opposition wasn't proof of weakness. It was confirmation of worth. Only those marked for victory attract battles of that magnitude. While others saw chaos, God saw craftsmanship. He was shaping a warrior who could withstand pressure without losing peace. Psalm 144 verse 1 declares that He trains your hands for war and your fingers for battle, meaning every confrontation was divine conditioning for what you're now equipped to handle. There's a certain strength only found in warfare. Faith that has never been tested can't be trusted, and endurance cannot mature without resistance. The enemy's attacks weren't random, they were strategic attempts to intimidate what he already saw rising within you. Yet every fiery dart only revealed your armor was real. You learned that prayer isn't weakness, it's a weapon. You stopped running from the fight because you realized victory had already been declared before the first blow was struck. The pressure you endured was never wasted. It exposed the spiritual power you didn't know you carried. Each battle carved something sacred into your spirit. Pain stripped away what pride had hidden. Disappointment crushed the illusions that comfort once built. Through every trial, your dependence on God deepened and your discernment sharpened. What survived the fire is what was meant to rise. You're standing stronger because everything false burned away. Isaiah 54 verse 10 reminds you that though the mountains be shaken and the hills be removed, God's covenant of peace will not be broken. Even when the ground trembled, your foundation held firm because it was rooted in Him, not in outcomes. Transitioning through warfare demands clarity of purpose. You discovered that the closer you got to breakthrough, the fiercer the battle became. The enemy fought hardest when promotion was near because he knew what you were about to step into. Every obstacle was a final test to see if you would bow under pressure or rise through persistence. You didn't retreat, you advanced. You learned to fight from victory, not for it. What once overwhelmed you became the very training ground that produced your authority. The resistance you faced refined your revelation, transforming confusion into confidence and fear into faith. The battles weren't punishment, they were prophecy. Every struggle whispered, "You're next." Each confrontation proved that heaven had already stamped your destiny with favor. When you thought you were being attacked, you were actually being assessed. God was proving your readiness to handle what others prayed for but couldn't sustain. Promotion always follows proving, and you've been proven faithful. Even when fatigue pressed in, grace carried you through unseen terrain. Every battle you fought in silence was a stepping stone to the throne prepared for you. There were moments when you questioned if your prayers even reached the sky, yet they did. God heard every cry, caught every tear, and recorded every act of endurance. You didn't lose faith, you learned focus. While others quit halfway, you kept moving through the fire with nothing but a promise and unshakable belief. The war didn't break you, it baptized you in boldness. You became fluent in spiritual warfare, learning when to speak, when to stand, and when to let the Lord fight on your behalf. 2 Timothy 4 verse 7 to 8 resounds in your spirit. You have fought the good fight, finished the race, and kept the faith, and there is a crown of righteousness awaiting you. Your scars tell the story of survival. They're not reminders of defeat, but evidence of deliverance. Each mark on your soul is a signature of victory, proof that you endured what was meant to erase you. Heaven saw every unseen battle, every quiet victory, every night you stood your ground when no one applauded. You passed tests that others never noticed, but heaven documented every one. The warfare didn't disqualify you, it distinguished you. You've been refined by fire, proven in battle, and trusted with glory. You didn't just survive, you graduated. The crown you wear tonight was forged in unseen warfare. Now that the fire has refined you, obedience will define you. One act of obedience right now can unlock what 10 years of effort never could. When God speaks, the power isn't just in the promise, it's in the response. Every breakthrough begins where surrender meets action. Many wait for doors to open, but few realize that heaven responds to motion, not just devotion. Obedience is the unseen key that turns spiritual locks. Deuteronomy 28 verse 1 to 2 declares that blessings will overtake those who listen diligently to the voice of the Lord and act on what He commands. That means the blessing isn't hiding, it's waiting for alignment. Faith begins where comfort ends. There's always a moment when what God says challenges what makes sense. You've prayed, you've believed, but the next step isn't another petition, it's participation. God doesn't reward hesitation disguised as holiness. He honors the ones who move even when the outcome is unclear. Every miracle recorded in Scripture required motion. Abraham leaving Peter, stepping the widow pouring. The act may look small, but submission carries supernatural weight. When your movement mirrors his instruction, the invisible starts to manifest visibly. The challenge is that obedience rarely feels convenient. It interrupts logic, rearranges comfort, and exposes trust. Yet true surrender doesn't negotiate, it yields. Partial compliance, no matter how sincere, still counts as disobedience. When God said to Saul, "Go and utterly destroy," keeping what looked valuable cost him the throne. Many lose miracles not because they didn't hear God, but because they hesitated between knowing and doing. James 1 verse 22 reminds us to be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving ourselves. Real faith proves itself in motion. Every divine instruction carries a reward attached to its completion. The promise may sound glorious, but the proof always requires an act of faith. God's voice doesn't just bring information, it releases direction. He gives revelation for movement, not meditation. Your response today sets the stage for tomorrow's overflow. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses stretched his staff. The walls of Jericho didn't fall until Joshua's army shouted. The miracle waited at the exact step of instruction. When your steps synchronize with his word, the supernatural becomes inevitable. Transition comes when you realize this is not a one-time decision, it's a lifestyle. Each day carries a new command, a new test of surrender. God uses your willingness to refine discernment. The more you follow, the clearer his voice becomes. Delayed response, on the other hand, clouds spiritual hearing. You can't walk in new revelation while clinging to old resistance. The door God is opening requires total alignment, not partial participation. It's not enough to believe in his word, you must move according to it. Surrender also unlocks strategy. God never wastes commands. Every instruction carries insight into his next move. When you act on what he said, he reveals what he'll do next. Many pray for open doors while ignoring the last directive given. Yet John 14 verse 23 declares that those who love God keep his words, and he will dwell with them. That means yielded hearts don't just open doors, they invite presence. You don't have to chase opportunity when you're walking in step with divine instruction. It begins to find you. It's easy to confuse excitement with surrender, but emotion never opens doors. Submission does. You can't worship your way into what only action can unlock. Some seasons require tears, others require trust, but this one requires a step. Faith without follow-through becomes a delay disguised as devotion. When God gives you a word, it's not for discussion, it's for execution. He isn't testing your knowledge, he's measuring your surrender. Every act of alignment is a seed that guarantees harvest even if the soil looks dry. There are moments when God's command will seem to cost everything, yet those are the very moments that carry destiny's key. Obedience demands courage, because it's the bridge between what's promised and what's possessed. You can pray for favor, but favor flows toward movement. Heaven's door opens the instant your action matches the word spoken over you. God has already released strategy. He's waiting for your step to activate it. Your next miracle won't meet you halfway. It's standing at the exact step of faith. Beloved, heaven never forgets who stayed when everyone else walked away. When others chose the easy road, you remained steadfast, holding to faith that few could see, but all of heaven celebrated. Every act of obedience, every unseen prayer, every moment you chose to believe when it felt impossible, none of it vanished into silence. God was keeping record, not to remind you of pain, but to reward your perseverance. Luke 16 verse 10 reminds us that whoever can be trusted with little can also be trusted with much. The moments you thought were overlooked were actually building the foundation for what's being released in this very hour. Faithfulness isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. It's the quiet choice to stand when you could have sat down to love, when bitterness tempted your heart to give, when no one said thank you. While the world applauds outcomes, God celebrates endurance. You didn't quit in the drought, and that's why the rain is coming. Every secret yes you whispered to God became a seed, and seeds always speak, even when buried. Galatians 6 verse 7 declares that whatever a person sows, that they shall also reap. The tears you shed were not wasted. They watered your next season of joy. Hidden obedience is the birthplace of visible authority. Those who master faith in the dark are trusted with influence in the light. God doesn't elevate to prove worth, He promotes to reveal maturity. The seasons that required silence were refining your strength. You learned to trust God without applause, to follow His voice without validation, and to keep walking when no one was clapping. That is the kind of faith that moves mountains, because it doesn't rely on sight, it rests in conviction. Every quiet moment of surrender was preparing you to carry public favor without losing humility. Transition comes when God decides it's time to make private battles public testimonies. The stage that's being set isn't about performance, it's about purpose. You didn't serve for recognition, you served because you were called. God saw every unseen act of kindness, every unnoticed offering, every moment you chose integrity when compromise could have been easier. Proverbs 3 verse 3-4 promises that mercy and truth, when bound around your heart, bring favor and good understanding before both God and man. Your faithfulness has been seen by the one who matters most, and His acknowledgement carries more weight than any human applause ever could. There is something sacred about staying when leaving would have been justified. Loyalty in obscurity builds a strength that storms cannot steal. You've prayed for others while fighting your own battles, lifted hands in worship while carrying unspoken burdens, and believed for miracles you hadn't yet experienced yourself. God took note of every moment. You weren't overlooked. You were being observed by the one who rewards in due season. The waiting didn't weaken you. It anchored you deeper in grace. Each season of hiddenness was heaven's training ground for responsibility. Before David held the crown, he held a harp in solitude. Before Joseph wore the robe of authority, he wore chains in a prison. Before you walk into the promise, God ensures your heart can handle it. Faithfulness in the field prepares you for favor in the palace. You've been proving, not performing, showing that obedience matters more than outcome. That kind of consistency carries eternal reward. There's a holy announcement being prepared with your name written across it. The same one who watched you weep in silence is ready to celebrate you in sight. Every hidden act of obedience has been translated into honor. Divine reward never arrives late. It arrives right. It waits until your heart is steady enough to hold what your faith prayed for. You are stepping into a season where the unseen will finally be seen, where the quiet labor will be met with visible recognition. God saw it all, the faith, the pain, the perseverance. And the same presence that witnessed your surrender is about to witness your victory. What you planted in secret is breaking through the surface. Your story is shifting from surviving to shining, because heaven always honors those who remained faithful when no one else did. What was once against you is about to start working for you. The tides are shifting, and heaven has issued a decree that every weapon formed against you has lost its voice. You've walked through battles that looked one-sided, moments that made it seem as though defeat was final. But what you didn't see was the reversal already being written in the unseen. God never lets His faithful ones end where the enemy tried to leave them. Psalm 34 verse 19 declares that many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. That all includes the pain, the delay, the misunderstanding, and the betrayal. Nothing that came against you will leave you empty-handed. Every attack is being converted into advantage. The God who restores doesn't just give back, He rewrites. Justice in His kingdom isn't measured by fairness, but by fullness. When He moves, He multiplies. You're not simply being given what was taken, you're being endowed with more than what you lost. The years that mocked your patience are about to magnify His glory. Those who once whispered that you wouldn't recover will soon have to witness what restoration looks like in God's hands. Heaven never just repairs what was broken, it rebuilds it better than before. Every delay that tried to bury your destiny was actually a setup for divine deliverance. There's a holy irony to the way God moves. The very people who misread your silence will hear your testimony shouted across platforms they never thought you'd reach. Micah 7 verse 8-9 proclaims, "When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light unto me." The same stage that once hosted your struggle will now display your strength. God is not merely reversing your situation, He's redeeming your reputation. Every lie that tried to define you is becoming a headline for His victory. Every injustice is being turned into evidence of His vindication. The turnaround has already begun, and it's happening faster than your eyes can comprehend. Reversals in the Spirit rarely make sense in the moment. They appear as sudden miracles that only heaven could orchestrate. God is taking what the enemy built to break you and transforming it into the very structure that will elevate you. When He intervenes, loss becomes leverage, pain becomes platform, and rejection becomes redirection. You're not stepping back into what was, you're walking into what's never been before. Each moment of resistance was actually a rehearsal for reward. God was proving that your faith could stand the pressure. Zephaniah 3 verse 19 promises that the Lord will deal with those who oppressed you and will give you praise and honor in every land where you were put to shame. That means your humiliation is about to host your exaltation. The same eyes that watched you struggle will see you shine. Every closed door that once felt like rejection is reopening as divine invitation. Heaven's justice is not silent. It's swift, sure, and saturated with mercy. Transitions in the spirit realm often come wrapped in paradox. You lose before you gain, fall before you rise, and weep before you rejoice. But when God reverses something, He doesn't simply turn it around. He transforms it entirely. What tried to bury you becomes the ground for your growth. What was meant to silence you becomes the sound of your testimony. You've reached the hour where everything that was once against you will start working for you. This is more than restoration. It's redemption with interest. You're not just recovering blessings, you're inheriting bonuses that only faithfulness could unlock. The years of endurance have built a strength in you that can no longer be shaken. You've proven that your belief isn't situational, but spiritual, and heaven rewards that kind of resolve. You won't have to explain this turnaround, because God's demonstration will speak louder than defense. The tables are turning, the records are changing, and every unseen prayer is meeting its visible answer. And when you align with heaven, overflow becomes effortless. The striving stops, the pressure lifts, and what once felt heavy becomes holy. There's a rhythm that unfolds when your will agrees with God's timing, a divine synchronization where miracles flow without struggle. The moment you stop chasing what was never assigned to you, what is meant for you starts finding its way. Alignment is not about perfection, it's about positioning. When your spirit thoughts and actions move in harmony with God's direction, you become a vessel ready to receive. The peace you feel after surrendering isn't emptiness, it's preparation. Heaven doesn't pour oil into cracked vessels, but it restores them before the overflow begins. Psalm 65 verse 11 declares, "You crown the year with your goodness, and your paths drip with abundance." That abundance is not random, it's released in response to order. God's blessings follow structure. When your heart is rightly aligned, the floodgates open in ways human effort could never achieve. Anxiety builds walls, but alignment builds channels. Obedience is heaven's invitation to abundance. The waters didn't part for Moses until he stretched his hand in faith. The nets didn't overflow for Peter until he threw them where Jesus instructed. Every miracle was preceded by movement in agreement with divine command. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8 reminds, "And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work." Overflow isn't about having more, it's about being positioned for purpose. When you align with what God has authorized, heaven funds it. There's a reason some seasons felt dry, not because God withheld, but because He was waiting for your agreement. He doesn't bless confusion, He blesses clarity. Once you step into divine order, the resources that once seemed delayed suddenly appear. It's not coincidence, it's confirmation. God never forgets what He promised, but He waits until your posture can handle the provision. Prosperity follows purpose, not pressure. The moment your motives match His mission, doors begin to respond. Everything you lost in the wilderness is being returned with interest. What seemed like lack was training for stewardship. When Joseph moved from the prison to the palace, it wasn't just restoration, it was redemption with overflow. The famine that threatened others became the season that promoted him. That's the beauty of divine alignment. It turns adversity into administration. When your life mirrors God's will, everything around you begins to multiply. Shift your focus from chasing to trusting. The world teaches you to strive, but the Spirit teaches you to stay. When you abide in His presence, provision becomes a byproduct. Proverbs 10 verse 22 says, "The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and He adds no sorrow with it." That means no exhaustion, no manipulation, no fear of losing it. What heaven gives carries peace as its proof. You won't need to fight for what fits your faith. There's a holy flow forming around your obedience. Every seed of faith you planted in tears is about to rise as evidence of His faithfulness. You're moving from empty nets to bursting boats, from wondering if God will come through to watching Him exceed your imagination. The same hand that once withheld to protect you is releasing to reward you. You didn't miss your moment, you matured into it. Picture the waters of blessing gathering at your feet, waiting for one command of surrender to break loose. Heaven's economy doesn't operate by panic, it operates by principle. When your yes aligns with His plan, what's meant for you no longer needs to be chased, it comes running. Every act of trust builds a pathway for increase. The overflow that follows is not a coincidence of effort, but the consequence of obedience. Heaven's economy is not slow, it's strategic. You've aligned, and now abundance is aligning with you. The same God who guided you through the drought is positioning you for harvest. The stillness you once mistook for delay was the sound of heaven setting the stage for overflow. Friend, you've prayed long enough now, it's time to walk into what you prayed for. The season of only declaring is shifting into the season of demonstrating. Every tear you sowed in faith has prepared the soil beneath your feet. The waiting wasn't wasted. It was building endurance for the weight of fulfillment. God is no longer just speaking about your promise. He's summoning you to move toward it. You've crossed the line where hoping turns into walking, where faith refuses to sit still any longer. There comes a moment when the promise doesn't require another confirmation, but a step. The Israelites didn't possess Canaan through conversation. They crossed into it through obedience. Deuteronomy 11 verse 24 declares, "Every place on which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours." That means territory is taken by movement, not meditation. Heaven has already signed the deed, your step activates the delivery. Fear may whisper that you're not ready, but faith knows you were born for this. Every hesitation delays what's already yours. The moment you move, the miracle meets you halfway. Faith never waits for perfect conditions. It creates them. The atmosphere shifts in response to action. The woman with the issue of blood didn't wait for an invitation. She reached out and power met her hand. The Red Sea didn't part until Moses raised his staff. Every miracle begins with motion. Matthew 21 verse 22 reminds you, "Whatever you ask in prayer, believing you will receive. Belief is not a feeling, it's a movement of the spirit that refuses to let doubt drive. When you believe, you behave differently. You start walking like the answer has already arrived. There's a holy urgency stirring in the atmosphere, not panic, but divine propulsion. You're not waiting anymore. Heaven is waiting for you. Every delay that felt like silence was actually God aligning conditions for your entry. The promise has matured, and the instruction is clear: step in. The waters will never part while you stand at the shore wishing. Faith only functions when it finds feet willing to move. Each step is a prophetic announcement that you're no longer negotiating with fear. The wilderness loses its grip the moment you decide to walk forward. Do not confuse comfort with confirmation. Sometimes the ground beneath you feels unstable because it's new territory. Faith rarely feels safe, but it's always secure. Hebrews 11 verse 1 defines it. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You don't have to see the bridge before you cross. You just have to trust the one who built it. God doesn't call you to analyze the path, He calls you to walk it. Each stride you take is a declaration that His word outranks your worry. You're stepping into a dimension where prophecy becomes possession. The dreams you once whispered are taking shape in visible form. Every yes you've given heaven has been echoing through eternity, aligning divine timing with earthly manifestation. What God declared isn't approaching, it's present. Your obedience unlocks what's been waiting behind the veil of preparation. Manifestation demands motion because faith without movement is fantasy. You can't walk into answered prayer while clinging to hesitation. The anointing you carry is for activation, not observation. The atmosphere around you is pregnant with fulfillment. You can feel it, the air is charged with completion. What once felt distant is now within reach. The river that separated you from destiny is parting under your feet. Fear cannot follow you where faith is leading. You've outgrown the language of delay. You're speaking the dialect of destiny. Every step you take announces to darkness that you've chosen trust over timidity. You see, every silent season has been scripting the stage for your breakthrough. Heaven's spotlight just shifted, and it's pointed at you. The same place that once felt forgotten has become the stage for fulfillment. What was whispered in prayer is about to be shouted in manifestation. The stillness that surrounded you wasn't absence, it was alignment. This moment carries prophetic weight, heavier than the years you waited, because time bends when divine timing arrives. The atmosphere has changed, and the waiting season has officially expired. The silence you once wrestled with has transformed into divine sound. Every unanswered prayer has turned into a melody of manifestation. You can almost feel creation echoing what Isaiah 62 verse 11 declares. See, your Savior comes. His reward is with him. The delay wasn't punishment. It was preparation for an announcement. The heaven that once seemed quiet is roaring with confirmation. What once looked uncertain has found its clarity under divine command. Every unseen promise is stepping out of the shadows to meet your faith in the open. There's a holy momentum moving through this moment. The prayers you thought vanished have gathered in the presence of God, ready to pour as visible answers. The walls that contained you are collapsing, not from striving, but from completion. Psalm 126 verse 1 to 2 captures it perfectly. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. The laughter you lost in the battle is returning as the sound of fulfillment. The same tears that watered your wilderness are birthing the harvest you once imagined. You've crossed from hidden to heralded. The obscurity that once tested you has become the evidence of your faithfulness. What was private pain is turning into public proof. God has taken what once broke you and transformed it into the birthplace of breakthrough. Your story is no longer one of endurance, it's one of emergence. You are walking into a chapter that demands recognition, not because of fame, but because of faith. Every scar you carry glows as a reminder that God finishes what He begins. Obedience and divine timing have collided, and creation itself is responding. Every element around you is echoing the same decree. It is done. Revelation 21 verse 5 resounds with it. He who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." The transformation is not partial, it's total. Everything connected to your name is being renewed, restored, and rewritten. What began as a struggle is ending in supernatural strength. This hour doesn't just carry breakthrough, it defines destiny. The doors that once seemed sealed have opened not by force, but by fulfillment. What begins now will echo through generations, establishing a legacy of faith and favor. Beloved, this is heaven's hour, and your name is written on it. This moment doesn't just matter, it marks eternity. Step into it fully. Your story is shifting under divine light. Before we close this message, I want to invite you to pause whatever you're doing and join in a moment of fervent, faith-filled prayer. This is a sacred space where your spirit aligns with God's heart. Let's come before Him together, believing that this is not just another moment, it's a turning point. Father, we come before you in awe of your presence. We thank you for the breath in our lungs, for the mercy that met us this morning, and for the grace that has carried us through every unseen battle. You are faithful through every season, and your timing never fails. Tonight we stand before you with open hearts, ready to receive what you have prepared since the beginning of time. Lord, for every tear we cried in silence, for every dream that felt delayed, for every prayer that seemed unanswered, we lift them all to you. We choose to trust that you were never late. You were always working, arranging, refining, and shaping us for this exact moment. What looked like delay was divine protection. What felt like loss was hidden preparation. And what seemed like silence was you speaking in a language we are finally learning to understand. We praise you because you are not only the God of promises, you are the God of perfect timing. You knew when to release, when to withhold, when to open doors, and when to let us grow in waiting. Tonight we lay down every trace of impatience and doubt. We exchange anxiety for alignment and fear for faith. You have not forgotten a single word you spoke over our lives, and we believe that this is the appointed time for those words to come alive. Father, many of us have walked through years of stretching, pruning, and testing, but through it all, you held us steady. You never abandoned us in the fire. You stood beside us when we didn't have the strength to stand. We thank you for endurance that became wisdom, for battles that became testimonies, and for scars that became signs of victory. Every challenge we endured was proof that you were shaping something stronger within us, something that could stand under the weight of what you are releasing tonight. Lord, we give you praise because you are turning stories around. You are redeeming what was broken, restoring what was lost, and resurrecting what looked buried. You are rewriting every ending that the enemy tried to claim. Where there was confusion, you are releasing clarity. Where there was fear, you are planting courage. Where there was lack, you are releasing abundance. You are proving once again that your word never returns empty. We thank you for the doors that are opening in this very moment, doors that no man can shut. We thank you for the opportunities that are aligning, the relationships you are restoring, and the favor that is finding us without striving. Tonight we lift our hands not in worry but in worship. We declare that you are worthy of every praise, every heartbeat, every moment of surrender. Father, we ask for sensitivity to your spirit. Let our steps match your rhythm. Let our hearts stay humble even in promotion. Let our obedience remain pure even when the blessings increase. We don't want to just receive what you've promised, we want to steward it with grace, integrity, and wisdom. Teach us to walk in alignment so that overflow becomes a lifestyle, not a moment. Thank you for reminding us that your promises don't expire. Thank you for showing us that this time holds more power than the last years combined. We sense the shift you are releasing, a turning of seasons, a transfer of favor, a release of destiny. We receive it with faith, not fear. We believe that you are making all things new, that your hand is upon us, and that your purpose is unstoppable. Lord, let this be the hour where peace settles every restless heart. Let joy flood every weary soul. Let faith rise like fire again. May this moment mark the beginning of testimonies that only you could write. We seal this prayer with gratitude, knowing that you are already moving, already restoring, already fulfilling what you began. We honor you, we trust you, and we love you. In Jesus' mighty name, we pray, Amen. If this message has spoken to your spirit and stirred something deep within you, I warmly invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that God's timing is never late. Thank you for being part of this growing community of faith. May God surround you with peace, overflow your life with favor, and let the light of His presence guide every step you take.